And tonight we are talking about a topic that, frankly, is one for the books. Y'all, this question of why does it matter that we know what we want? Why does it matter what we want? And the reason why this is even important to discuss in the first place is because it has very colossal and significant ramifications on our lives if we're not intentional. Even just today, I was looking at a newsletter I put out a couple months ago where I was really looking into the Greek origin of the word intention, and it just talks about the Middle English of this word intention. So the etymology of it, I initially was kind of looking at the Latin and Greek origins, but I just saw it kind of progress over the years in the Middle English, and I think it was the 12th century. It was talking about the emotions, the mind, the body, every part of you effectively engaging towards an outcome and moving in a direction for a certain goal. And when it comes to this question of why does it even matter what I want, it's so important that we ask this and that we look in the mirror and that we examine the integrity of the truth to this question of what do I want in the first place, much less why does it matter? Because we're going to be moving in a direction, mind, body, soul, spirit. And the goal is that all of our faculties are working in concert with each other towards the same outcome. But if we're not being honest about what we want in the first place, our mind, our conscious mind is thinking one thing where subconsciously we're going in a different direction because we're not actually looking in the mirror and being truthful with ourselves about what we want in the first place. So why this matters is because there's this what is it? There's this biblical concept about a double-minded man, and it's about effectively like it's about like when you're tossed by the winds, and it's like being on a ship, and it's there's no stake in the ground, and there's no anchor to hold you when the winds pick up, and you're just kind of being tossed about by every wind, by every storm that comes. And so if we're not being honest and looking in the mirror for ourselves of what is it that's really on my heart? What is it that I really am longing for and wanting? Then that's going to be remaining in our subconscious, where our conscious mind is going in a different direction and we're divided. We've got two different parts. And sometimes the thing that's scary about that in terms of why this matters, it's yes, we're going to be double minded, but in that double mindedness, people experience us in two very different ways. I'm not sure if you've ever heard somebody say this to you or if you've ever experienced this with somebody else, but the concept of what feels like walking on eggshells, where you just feel like you're going to encounter somebody and they'll be two completely different people. And so, with us being aware of what we want and what's kind of going on in our subconscious, what that does is that it brings it to the surface so that we're able to have continuity with who we are, that we're showing up as the same person regardless of who we're around. We're showing up with consistency, with predictability, with reliability, and people can know that we're a safe place for them. When people start acting very differently in terms of, one morning you're going to engage them in one way, and then the next day there's somebody so different, it kind of forces us to put our guard up. But so often a reason for that is because that person is not even being honest with themselves. So how can they be honest with you? And so this question of why does it matter what I want? There's the side of the integrity and the predictability for relationships. It's really important to kind of consider as well. Who do we want to be for those that we love? And so when we start thinking about this question of why does it matter? Why is it important? Another reason, frankly, is because you matter. What is going on inside of you, what is on your heart, is so indicative of perhaps even a calling that is yours, that's for your life, that is for nobody else to answer but for you. And it could be something small. It doesn't have to be this life-changing, big, catastrophic event, but something that's on your heart is so often indicative of something that we're actually supposed to be doing. And so if we're ignoring and kind of suppressing what we want or what are the longings of our hearts, we might actually be silencing something that really is the very thing which we were created to do in the first place. And so before I kind of keep chatting, I just wanted to check in on the chat. Good evening, Man in the Hat. I'm so glad to see you. Wayne, So good. So good you're here. And Wayne, it's fun. I'm glad I feel like we have a new friend here. I'm excited to get to know you. Man in the Hat, I'm listening, but we'll be out of the chat. Okay, well, we'll miss you. I love seeing you here. Also, for those of you, we are doing trivia night tomorrow night. I need to make sure that I set our timer, not set our timer, but create an event for that because we're going to be doing 90s, I think it's 90s movies trivia tomorrow night, which is going to be fun. So excited for that. Comic Flick Fusion, good to see you. Um, I love this. Been coming to your live stream to get more clarity and soul searching, but it's been really helping me. I'm so grateful to hear that. I got to tell you, y'all, for those of you who are new here, I see Jake, you're putting some things in the chat. I don't know if you're still here. But y'all, the reason why we get on and have the Knowing Show, there's a lot of reasons. So I'll pick three. The first is community. Really being able to grow together and be able to hear other people's experience. Experience is probably one of the biggest assets and bits of equity that you and I can have. What have we personally encountered that we then can be changed by as a result from, but also give to other people? Our experience is really, truly our greatest asset in so many ways. And so here in the chat, we get to learn from each other and we get to have that community. And actually, we're going to be kind of building out something a little bit more formal because I'd love to be able to literally see your faces and engage at a deeper level. So number one is community. And number two is growth. Comic Flick Fusion, you just said, I just love it. Like you've been getting more clarity and doing more soul searching. And y'all, you're worthy of being known by you. I existed for 20 years waiting for my knight in shining armor to come and know me and effectively deem me worthy of being known. And then effectively, I guess I was expecting him to tell me who I was because I never did the work. I never took the time to know who I was to begin with. And so when we're thinking about kind of the second reason of the Knowing Show, it's so that we do exactly what Comic Flick Fusion just said in the chat. We get to know ourselves. We get clarity on who we are, what we're called to do. Why are we here? Those are big questions. And the more clarity we have on them, the more we're actually able to take action as a result of who we uniquely are made to be. So number one is community. Number two is that soul searching and that clarity. And three is, okay, then it's time to take action. When we talk about effectively the experience that we have that we get to share in the community, it's an ongoing way where it's not just looking at the past, but it's present. It's in real time. Today, this is what I learned. It's forcing you and I to become teachers of our own selves, and then much less so be able to give to others. This concept of teaching is something that is so important because if we want to learn anything, one of the surest pathways to do that is to actually teach it. And so if we start here in the chat just with each other, start sharing, this is what I learned today, and this was the lesson, this is the take home, this is how I'm going to be changed as a result. You're effectively teaching yourself and everybody around you. And we get clear, clarity so often is the result. So it's the community, it's the soul searching, and it's the action. It's the taking and assuming of agency. Earlier this morning, because we go live 2 times a day, I think it was Man in the Hat, you said, it's not just about knowing, but it's about understanding. And, that part of soul searching, and then it gets into, okay, excuse me, it's time to take action. It's time to live according to that which we now know. And then where am I actually going? This is where we get a little bit meta. So bear with me because this is how my mind works. Because I love data and I love like A/B testing. This is where kind of the marketing brain comes in. But when we find something that's working, let's test it. Let's iterate on it. Let's make it better and improve upon it. And that way of living, of constantly kind of dancing between this line of existing in this really deeply rooted place of peace, in addition to, but I'm striving for a goal. I'm reaching for an ideal. I'm going to be better. I'm going to fulfill on why I'm here. That it's purpose driven, but it's ultimately at the same time rooted in peace where I actually already know that I'm enough. And that's dynamic. That's the power of juxtaposition. Somebody said this once, and I just thought it was brilliant. They effectively said it's the mark of a mature adult to allow for two opposing truths to coexist. And that would be an opposing truth. Like, you're enough, peace, be in the present, and that's the power of the conjunction and be, what do you want? Where are you headed? What are you called to do? Why are you here? And so being able to balance both of those and hold like one foot in both camps is truly the mark of an educated and mature mind and being. I even as I'm saying that, kind of having one foot in both, I think that actually is the activation of the right brain and the left brain. The right part of your brain, the creative, the peace, the joy, the emotions, that's in stasis. That's in like a good calm place. Whereas the left hemisphere of the brain can be more managerial and more forward thinking, visionary, strategic, but it's not out of whack. It's not, you're not imbalanced. You're actually really, really balanced. So I just love that you made that comic flick, because I think that that's so incredibly important about why we're even here to begin with. Verns, hello. Thank you. It's good to see you. I flew most of today. I feel like my day went to the flights. I need to take a cough break. Hold on one second. When was it? I guess Thursday, not this past Thursday, so I guess, gosh, was it 2 weeks ago? I just got wrecked from flying. And I think today I flew again and I think I'm safe, but my Lanta, I just got so sick. Yeah. Anyways, I'm recovering, but it's still like in there a little bit. Thomas Casey, good to see you. Wayne, I love authenticity. Oh, it would be fun. We should have like an actual chat about authenticity one of these days. Tomorrow night, we're going to do trivia. For those of you who just joined, we're going to do 90s trivia at 8:30 p.m. tomorrow night. So mark your calendars. I'm so excited. And y'all, you guys inspired me. So because we've been having so much fun doing trivia, I'm hosting an event here in DC with my dad. That's why I flew in. And we're going to be doing a trivia night. And it's actually going to be a 90s, 1930s, because that's the theme of the event. So if anyone's in the DC area, let me know. It'd be fun to have you. But everyone's dressing up 1930s themed. We're having like a live jazz band come, and then we're going to do trivia, a 1930s trivia. And it's been so fun to get to know the 1930s. So you all inspired me. Thank you for making life better. But yes, we should have a conversation about authority. Ooh, that's so good. Wayne says, let's ask why it's so hard to change. Talk about ego and pride. Ooh, what a word. Honestly, the ego and the pride piece, it's interesting with ego and pride. And I'm curious, I'd love to hear I'd love to hear everybody's opinion really fast. If you guys are up for this, can we do a quick definition check? Because here's the thing. If I'm saying the word ego and you're thinking of it in one sense and I'm using it in another sense, we're going to completely be missing each other. So I'd love to hear, how do you guys define ego? So I'm going to actually take a moment and just wait for you guys to put that answer in the chat, because that's actually so important. I've seen debates. I think it was, who was it? It was Jordan Peterson and somebody else. And they actually took every single beginning of their debate. They took the initial opening like 3 to 5 minutes to repeat each other's arguments and ensure that they were on the same page in terms of like engaging with each other. Because if you're not understanding terms, if you're not actually understanding what the other person is trying to say, how in the world can you articulate, or not even articulate? That's the goal, is to be able to articulate it. But how could you ever defend your position well enough to even be able to confront theirs, because you're just ships in the night passing? And then here's the other thing. Do we even want to know truth to begin with? And that's a mirror moment for all of us. Do we even want to know what's true, or do we want to be right? And that is like because if I want to be right, I'm actually not even going to ever be able to really listen to what the other person is saying, only ever for the purpose of strengthening my own argument. But if I want to know what's true and I want truth to win, then actually we can be on the same side. We're on the same team. My brother-in-law, the one who was killed by a drunk driver, he said that years and years and years ago to my sister. He would say, why are we fighting? We're on the same team. And it's just this foundational approach to life of, are we on the same team? Or are we going to be going at it against each other? Because if truth is the goal, then we can sit side by side on the same bench and examine this problem rather than you sitting on the other side, me sitting on one, and then we attack each other. So is truth the goal, or is the goal to be right? I love it. Okay. I am going to just check in here and see what you guys are saying about your definition. Ooh, I love this. Millie Medina. Good to see you. I have to see Freud's definition. Put that in. I'm excited to see what his actual definition is. Pride is a sin in one definition. Be a student of life and your ego will dissolve. Ooh, I love that, Ruben. Be a student of life and your ego will dissolve. That's so good. The shadow scoring to Carl Jung, Mark Crawford. I've heard, I think that's where people are talking about, oh gosh, someone talked about this, the shadow work. Okay, wait, I'm going to make a note for myself. My friend Mark DeGrasse needs to come back on here. Hold on. I'm messaging, can you invite Mark DeGrasse back on the show to discuss shadow work? Okay. Sweet. I just asked. Okay. So hopefully we'll be getting him back on here. I would love to dive into shadow work. So, Ed Mundell, thank you. I'm glad you're here. I'd love to hear your definition of ego. Oh, I'm so glad, Lendl Jr. It's good to see you. But yes, come back tomorrow for trivia. Sammy, oh, I'm so glad you're here. I've never seen you join in the evening, so this is so happy to see you. For those of you who are new, Sammy is a friend of the Knowing Show, and he joined us a couple weeks ago in the morning. We have a morning Knowing Show where we dive into a daily lesson in A Course in Miracles. It's about 15, 20 minutes, and honestly, it can kind of range anywhere from like 10 to 30 minutes, but usually it's around 15 to 20. And we just have a morning lesson, and it's really a time where we are cultivating our minds and our hearts and spirits. And it's like, okay, let me remind myself of what's truer than what the world says, how I'm feeling today, what is the superordinate principle. And it's kind of like that time in the morning where it's like, okay, I'm disciplining my mind. I mean, we go to the physical gym in the morning, and it's like, let's go to the mental gym and remind ourselves of what's true. And Sammy joined a couple of weeks ago, and actually the day that he joined, it was the anniversary of when he had a pretty bad accident and has been struggling with being a quadriplegic. And Sammy, even as I say that, that's not who you are. So struggling with that in terms of the physical sense. But man, Sammy, we all love you so much. And two, who are you? And I just would love, this question of ego. It is so easy to tie our ego to the external. I've actually, this question of ego is it's so potent for every single one of us. I've had this thought, if my body and face and fingers and legs got mangled in a fire, would I, who would I be? There was this young man that I found. He's 23 years old. And Sammy, I thought of you when I saw him. He has no legs. He's missing an arm, and he has one finger. And he literally, like, with his one finger, he like lifts up his body and kind of like pushes himself because he's got no legs. And he's been on stages with Richard Branson and Tony Robbins, and he's 23, and he was just committed to not being a victim in his life. He was like, I am not going to be confined to what other people say about my body. I'm not going to be confined to my own physical, like literally physical limitations. And he talked about the discipline of the mind. And this is why the mental gym, the physical gym, yes, but the mental gym is so important going into the arena, because we have full power over our thoughts. We have full power over who we choose to be. And y'all, there's so many people that can be served and changed as a result of our choice. And that power of choice is so incredibly important. And so ego ego so often is that voice in our head, and it's like that the little angel on the shoulder that can really, really keep us stuck. Chief the medicine man, good to see you. Ego is a part of our personality that gives us confidence to do things outside of our comfort zone, but it shouldn't run your life because ego alone is not authenticity. What a good perspective. I love that. Um, and then here's what's so funny. This is why definitions were important, right? Because Mark says the ego is a part of you that keeps you from being your absolute best. It's the worst of your best qualities manifested. So interesting. I love this. I love these perspectives. Matthew says the part of the brain that mediates between the conscious and the unconscious. See, this is why we need to define terms, because the Eastern and Western definitions of ego are very, very, very different. Wayne, yes, we want to know truth, but our ego and pride stop us from seeking our true, authentic selves. For me, hey, AJ, good to see you. For me, ego would be someone's internal fixed values and beliefs. Guys, this is so good. Yeah, Carl Jung started shadow work. It's what you do. How cool. I love that. Ego is flying too close to the sun. Down, better believe. Mark Crawford, shadow work is being able to recognize the flaws in your best parts, where confidence becomes pride and arrogance. That's how Carl Jung describes ego. Freud is similar, but Jung takes it much deeper. Okay, so when we're talking about ego here, and I'm just so glad that we're talking about the different definitions, because really it is confusing. The way that tonight when we're talking about ego, so talking about it from the perspective where it's effectively the manifestation, like you said, of almost like the worst part of your best qualities. So it's like taking that confidence and making it where ego is actually rooted in fear. So I'm talking about that kind of ego, the ego that is rooted in something that's effectively fear-based. And that voice in your head, it ultimately separates us from everybody around us. It says nobody understands. It says that we will never be able to be fully loved as we are. And the part about this kind of ego, because again, there's the Eastern and Western definitions, but this kind of ego is really damaging, because I think probably the most devastating aspect of ego is the fact that it separates. Whereas in the other perspective, what is more true than that is love. And love binds everything together, every single one of us. Somebody said this once. They were like, there's far more things like in terms of you and me than there is different. We all were children. We all were infants. We all need food to survive. We all need water to survive. We all need sunlight. We all want love. We all want to belong. There's countless ways in which you and I are similar. Yet the ego comes in because it's rooted in fear. It preys on the insecurity and the lack of, but it's, what's funny is that it can masquerade as being puffed up, and it can masquerade in so many different ways. The masks of ego are important for each one of us to consider, because we all have them. We all have different masks, but it's the ego talking, and one of the things that is really interesting. Well, I'm not going to go there. I don't want to go there. One of the things that's interesting is that when we really look at the masks of ego can sound like I'm better than everybody and separate that way, or it can be I'm never going to be good enough and separate us that way. And so either way, it causes separation. Either way, it so often is rooted in fear. And at the end of the day, it really limits us. It actually, if we're looking at the world through the lens of fear and through the lens of that voice of ego, we're not, it's like what you were saying, Wayne, it's preventing authenticity, and it's preventing our ability to truly connect with other people. So I'm just jumping back here in the chat. Mark says, what do you feel would be the main points of your shadow or ego that you feel needs the most work? Well, when you say main points of your shadow, this is the way that I think of the shadow, and you tell me. And I, again, there's frankly, I could do a lot more study on Freud, Jung. Like I've done hardly any, so I'm not speaking about it from that perspective. I'm frankly just talking about it from the perspective of my experience. So I'd love to learn from you. Every single shadow, especially if it's a big shadow, speaks to a greater light. And so I was, for example, sitting across from my darling yesterday, and we were talking about how one of his greatest lights is also one of his greatest shadows. And it makes sense that the greatest light would cast the greatest shadow. And so the things that this is where looking at ego is so important, to be curious about it rather than looking at it through the lens of judgment, because so often beneath that is a fear which warrants a tenderness and a care for that, for to be able to kind of heal it and tend to it. But also on the other side of it, usually there's a value there that speaks to this conversation of why does it matter what you want in the first place? Because if we're not being honest about what we want, it might come out as ego driven or something that is akin to fear, because we're not being honest about, well, what's the light version of that? What's the antithesis of this shadow that I'm experiencing? And maybe there's actually something really, really beautiful that's been stirring in our heart that we've been silencing and judging because we're not allowing ourselves to have the integrity to look in the mirror and say, you know what, I actually really, really want that. And so I'm curious if that resonates with y'all, to the point of, are there things in your heart and in your soul that light you up and that you feel drawn to and called towards, but you've never really let yourself lean into that? So I'm just jumping back here in the chat. Man in the Hat, fear is simply a process inhibitor. If you fear it, prevents you from moving forward unless you fight it with courage. I love that. Chief the Medicine Man, shadow are the parts we deemed unsafe from childhood people who laugh loud, gets teased, and then they change themselves to fit in and be safe. Oof, what a word, man. I felt that, I've never thought of that as shadow, but I totally get that. Don't Cap says ego is hostility, pride, jealousy, resentment, intolerance, anger, etc., all negative traits. And that's where it's like ego wears different masks. I think of this perspective. I've been talking with different executives because we'll help them with building their personal brands. And one of them is showing up on social media. But I see ego show up in two very different ways. One is, oh, I'm so excited to kind of flaunt my stuff. So that's one side of ego. But then the other one is, it reminds me of the Pharisee who, in the biblical story, it's like the tax collector who's known as the sinner is like on his knees asking God for forgiveness. And the Pharisee is like, I thank God I'm not like other men. And so people who, the way ego can show up conversely to, I want to show up and have everybody know how great I am. The other side of ego, it's still ego, but it's just a completely different mask. And it's, no, I'm actually proud of myself for not doing that. I'm not like them. And finding kind of self-justification and a pride in that in and of itself. And so ego really, really shows up in such different ways. Fear, false evidence appearing real. Well, my gosh. I've heard that, but I didn't realize it was like an acronym. That's so good. I love that. Mark says, well, I feel everything comes from fear. Yes, fear turned outward is anger. Fear turned inward is depression and anxiety. I don't feel fear. I don't feel fear is sort of the ego at all. I feel the ego can be formed from fear. I've thought of fear as kind of the root of ego. But I'm really, so you said you feel the ego can be formed from fear. I think we're on the same page, but I could be wrong. I might just be totally missing what you're saying. But I love that fear turned outward is anger, fear turned inward is depression and anxiety. But I think that where ego can manifest in terms of separation is the fear of not belonging and the fear of people not seeing you, not loving you, and it's like those lies that can cause the separation in relationship. So I'm curious if I'm missing your point and I want to learn. So teach me. Kenny, I get in my classic. Oh, hmm. I don't know what you mean by that, but he says all is right with the world, so I'm glad. Um, Justin, I find myself fighting against this ego you just described daily. You know what's interesting? Ruben says ego is a tool for the body to create an identity it can recognize. I'm pinning this for everybody. Ego is a tool for the body to create an identity it can recognize. Y'all, this is so good. Ruben, I love that. It's really, really interesting because man, there's a lot here. Are we Are we willing to not just do the work, but are we brave enough? Do we have the courage, to use your word earlier, do we have the courage to look in the mirror and acknowledge the identity that is currently there? And there's layers of identity, right? I'm not talking about the identity of like who you truly are, who you were created to be, but like the current layers of identity that we've put on, ego being one of them. When I first started doing therapy, I had never done any work. I had never gotten to know myself. And I just was like so far from emotional intelligence. I had no idea what it was. And frankly, I viewed emotions as weakness. And so in my kind of pursuit of therapy, and actually I started therapy to heal from my brother-in-law's death. That was like the first real reason why I started. And he took me through this therapeutic process called internal family systems, where effectively we have different parts. But there's our core self, like who God created us to be, who we were uninhibited by the world around us. And there's the different parts are there's one, the wounded part, in addition to the true self. So there's the true self, the wounded part. And then there's the manager, and the manager's job is to really, really control everything in our lives so that we actually don't engage with the wounded part, to keep the wounded part safe. And in that process of trying to keep the wounded part safe, the manager actually takes the helm. So while it's silencing the wounded part, it also is silencing the true self. And it really is like, hey, I've got it. Everybody, we're good. I'm going to keep you safe. And it really is, it has good intention. It has good desires. It's like what you were saying earlier about the ego, like the shadow parts are formed in childhood when we experienced people or experiences as unsafe. And so the protector learns different armor to put on based on these unprocessed experiences from childhood. And then that's so often the voice in our head is that protector. There's also the firefighter part, which is the part of us that picks up our phone anytime we're feeling upset and we want to distract or we're in a fight, and we turn on the TV or we turn on music or a podcast to avoid dealing with the issue at hand. And so the firefighter distracts, puts out the fire, but both the firefighter and the protector are trying to keep us from accessing the wounded part. So this whole concept of the ego and the false self. I love Man in the Hat. I love that you just said that ego is a false self, arrogant confidence that leads you to complacency. It's so much of it is a false self, and whether it's ego masking as, in multiple different ways, or it's fear that's coming up. Either way, it's a layer that we think is a part of who we are. And so when we start peeling back the onion, when we start peeling back the layers of this false self and this false identity, and we get closer and closer to our true self, ego is like kicking and screaming because it doesn't want to go, it wants to stay. I think that there's actually something very real about the ego, where it's an illusion, but it's a very strong one, and it feels very real. And I think I'm curious, and I gotta go down to the bottom of the chats here to hear your thoughts. Um, but I think it does have I think it is so often stemmed and rooted in fear, because what's gonna happen when we do see our true self? Are we going to be able to love what we find? Are we going to be acceptable and worthy? And so it's easier to maintain the layers than to peel back and come face to face with the truth. And so the question is, will we be a gracious explorer of our soul and look at it with curiosity and withhold judgment so that our true self can be seen, the true self that we weren't created to be in the first place. And until that true self feels safe to come out and kind of like sit and resume the driver's seat, it's like the ego is attacking the true self, because I think the ego really has a belief in what those childhood voices say, which is you're not lovable. And the true self has to kind of like gain the courage to be like, no, no, I am. I have a higher truth that I adhere to. And there's a higher authority than my feelings. There's a higher authority than what other people say. And y'all, this is a very real thing. The narratives that other people say to us, they have so much power over us until we do the work to contend with them. And the work so often can look like pulling those narratives and putting them into the limelight and actually intentionally confronting them and saying, you know what, for me, one of those narratives was some things my former husband said. And I had to shine the light of truth on them and say, you know what, you said this, this, and this. And I actually believe that God holds a different opinion over me. And I hold a different opinion over me too. So I'm not going to let what you say rule my life and rule how I show up and the value that I think I bring to the world. Just looking down here in the chat. Oh, Chief, the medicine man. I love this. We got to integrate our shadow. If not, we keep getting triggered. That's so, so, so good. It really is so true. Then the things that trigger us have power over us. The people have power over us from the past. The experience that we didn't process and heal from has power over us. Others can have the same, but manifest as passive, like creating shyness. For me, it creates boldness and arrogance. Interesting. Yes. Ego. I hear what you're saying. Like it really does manifest in so many different ways. That's such a good point. Ruben, I love that. He says, I think it was funny that Jesus paid taxes. Even in his greatness, he still paid his taxes. That's so good. Okay. Y'all, I just realized, so I'm on East Coast time and somebody asked, are you tired? Yes. I do need to go to sleep. Oh, I love this. All right, y'all, we're going to end with a fun question. Brian, I love your questions. Do you like to cook or are you a team takeout? So we're going to end with this. This is our fun question for the night. So tell me, what are you guys? And then we'll hang up here. What are you guys? Team takeout. Do you like to cook? It's funny. We were just talking about this the other night because my video stopped working and I couldn't see what people were saying in the chat. And what people were saying in the chat was that they couldn't hear me. And so I actually ended up going downstairs and like starting to cook with you guys because I couldn't, like everything froze and I couldn't get out of Restream, which is where I'm live. And it was so funny. And in that process, I was like cooking and I think we're going to do like a little cooking show. Not really. But I might start cooking while we're all hanging out. Jake. Jake. I'm sorry you feel that way. You are free to go, sir. Brian says, love to cook. I love that. Richard's cooking. Richard's good to see you. Chief, the medicine man, I make my own meals. Me too. Although I will say when I do go out or get takeout, I really like eating something that I don't cook like a pho. Like I've never made pho. That just sounds so overwhelming to me. Like so many things. It's going to take forever. Maybe not, but it looks complicated. So I would rather go out to eat something very kind of elaborate or difficult to make. But man, if I'm just going to go out for a steak dinner, like I'd rather make that at home. But home chef, I love that. That's cute. 𝐥𝐤𝐲𝐿𝐤. I'm actually not married anymore. So, I love it. Byron says truth or dare, but I'm a little bit nervous about what you're going to say. So you can put it, well, I don't know. Maybe we'll play that game tomorrow after trivia. Okay, guys, we're going to do trivia tomorrow, 8:30 p.m. Eastern. We're going to do 90s music trivia, which is going to be so fun. And I can't wait. So Yay, I'm so glad. Creamy chicken Alfredo, holy crap. Ugh, so good. Um, Seafood pho, man, that sounds so, so good. Ruben, you're a gem. Thank you. Y'all, I just have been loving this conversation tonight. I feel sad to go, but I know, I just feel like there's gonna be so much fun for us ahead. I'm really, really excited about the community we're building. I'm so grateful for, like, such intelligent humans, sitting here chatting with you guys tonight. I'm like, "Dang, I'm learning a lot." So, it's fun. Michael Grimes, good to see you. Wayne, mm, man, Wayne, you just freaking I'm gonna go cry now. You just made my night. Thank you. All right, y'all. Thank you. Have a wonderful, wonderful night. We'll be live tomorrow, 8:30 p.m. Eastern to play trivia, but also 9 a.m. Eastern, and we'll be doing our daily Course in Miracles. Also, before I jump off, quick question. I know that we'll be doing a community here pretty soon, and frankly, I have to get through this week being here and not get through. I get to enjoy this week co-hosting this event with my dad. Next week, I'm finishing my book. And so in the coming weeks in March, I'm really going to be diving into the community. But I do have a quick question for you guys. Is it helpful when I schedule out the shows? Like if every single day I was going to like create effectively like a show calendar where it's 9 a.m. We go live every day at 9. And sometimes there's like a little bit of a delay, but for the most part, I'm aiming at 9. So would it be helpful if I did 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Eastern, and like set the times for the shows? Is that good and helpful? I don't know if you guys can choose get notified, but I think you can. So while we're kind of in this middle period of building out the community and kind of like figuring out what that's going to look like, Man in the Hat says yes. Okay, so what I'll do, I will go ahead and schedule out the show for tomorrow morning and trivia. And then I also, for Brian, you're wonderful. He joins me over on Foundation First Marketing. That's where I talk all things marketing. We're like very early in that channel. So it's like very, very few followers. But if you'd like to go subscribe, I'd love to have you. But we talk business there. So Foundation First Marketing if you're interested. But yes, okay. So I am going to schedule out for tomorrow, and I'll just do that after every show. So, all right, y'all. Thank you so much. Have such a good night. I will talk with you tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. And